We absolutely love the passionate delivery and the clear declarative stance here, but let's jump right into the feedback using the completeness and focus lens.
Yeah, let's get into it.
The primary argument occasionally loses its sharp focus by weaving too freely between the factual debunking of specific historical claims and broad commentary on modern sociological trends.
Right, and the weakness here is really that the material tackles, well, just a massive amount of ground.
Yeah, it really does.
You've got the Christopher Columbus journals, you've got the metaphorical nature of the book The Delectable Negro, and these really rare 19th century Philadelphia skin tanning instances.
Heavy stuff.
Extremely heavy. But the author constantly interrupts these vital, grounded fact checks with broad assertions about critical race theory and, the oppression Olympics.
Right.
So bouncing back and forth between historical evidence from the 1800s and modern cultural commentary, it dilutes the hard impact of the factual debunking.
It totally does. It makes the timeline of the argument feel a bit scattered.
Exactly.
I mean, you are asking the listener to process the horrific reality of the transatlantic slave trade in one breath, and then asking them to analyze the toxic dynamics of a YouTube comment section in the very next.
It's just cognitive whiplash.
So a key theme running through this material seems to be the tension between historical fact and modern narrative. I mean, if you're building a house, you pour the foundation before you start criticizing the neighborhood, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Does the current structure risk causing a listener to tune out the facts because they get caught up in buzzwords like CRT too early in the narrative?
That's clearly laid out. I wonder, though, if we've considered how isolating the facts first makes the subsequent cultural critique hit much harder.
Oh, absolutely.
Because, the listener has already been thoroughly convinced by the historical evidence. The suggestion here is to group the historical fact-checking together to build an impenetrable fortress of undeniable evidence before pivoting to the broader cultural.
So give us some concrete examples of what that looks like on the page.
Sure. So look at the heavy lifting the author is doing with the historical source. First, we have the debunking of the Columbus journals, right? Explaining how those initial rumors of Carib cannibalism were essentially just European propaganda.
Yeah, to justify conquest.
Exactly. That is a foundational historical point. And then the author dives into the nuanced academic context of Vincent Woodard's book, The Delectable Negro.
Which is such a brilliant inclusion, but man, it requires deep concentration from the reader.
It really does.
Because the author correctly explains that the book explores the metaphorical and economic consumption of Black bodies in a capitalist system.
Right, the extraction of labor and vitality.
Yeah, it's a profound academic metaphor, but internet commentators routinely misread the title and weaponize it as literal proof of systemic cannibalism.
Yeah, and explaining that distinction between an academic metaphor about capitalism and an actual literal industry of human consumption, that takes really careful, methodical pacing.
For sure.
If you just drop a highly charged modern buzzword like critical race theory right in the middle of explaining Woodard's thesis, the reader's brain just stops.
The defensive walls go right up.
Exactly. They stop absorbing the historical nuance because now they're thinking about modern politics.
It's all about managing the cognitive load, When you present the rare, deeply disturbing Philadelphia skin tanning instances,
which are horrifying.
Absolutely horrifying. Or the specific, highly symbolic desecration of Nat Turner's remains being boiled down for grease. I mean, the reader needs a moment to process the factual reality of those isolated horrors.
Yeah, you haven't let the cement dry on the historical foundation yet before you start criticizing the modern neighborhood.
Right. So how do we structurally shift this?
The author needs to move the Columbus journals, the textual analysis of The Delectable Negro, and the clarification of the Nat Turner and Philadelphia instances into a single, cohesive historical fact-check block early in the piece.
So no modern commentary in that section at all?
None. Just get all of those historical realities clearly defined in one isolated space. Let the timeline speak entirely for itself.
And then, once you have laid out all those facts, once the human leather rumors are firmly contextualized as isolation atrocities rather than a widespread industry, you deploy a clear pivot sentence to shift the narrative momentum.
Right. A concrete example of this would be using a pivot sentence like, "So why do these rumors persist today?"
That's perfect. It immediately signals to the reader that the history lesson is concluded and the sociological analysis is beginning.
Yeah, and then you shift into the discussion about the comment section behavior, the dynamics of that, whatever podcast clip with Brian, and the whole concept of the oppression Olympics.
Isolating the facts first just makes that subsequent cultural critique hit significantly harder.
Because you've earned the right to philosophize. You've done the hard work of the historian.
Which grants you the authority of the critic. But, that authority doesn't just come from the structural arrangement of your facts.
No, definitely.
It is heavily dependent on the words you choose to deliver them, which brings us to tone and style. The tone leans heavily on generalizing language that risks alienating listeners who might otherwise be highly receptive to the factual corrections.
Yeah, the weakness here is the jarring tonal friction.
It's really noticeable.
The author uses these coined pejorative terms like blackists and describes the opposition as brainwashed, right after citing those deeply sensitive historical extremes we just discussed.
Yeah, like presenting the horrific facts of Nat Turner's desecration and then immediately using internet slang like BS claims or attacking someone's lack of education. It's like putting a bumper sticker on a hearse.
Wow. Yeah, that's a good analogy. It completely trivializes the gravity of the history you just asked the reader to respect.
While the author's frustration is clear and honestly totally justified by the sheer absurdity of the viral human furniture claim.
I mean, human couches? Come on.
Right. But leaning into insults can just come off as dismissive. It shifts the author from the high ground of an objective truth teller to an active participant in the mudslinging they are critiquing.
So the suggestion here is to soften the pejorative labeling to maintain ultimate authority as the objective historian in the room, allowing the stark historical facts to do the heavy lifting.
I can see what you're going for here. Let's see how we can strengthen this, though. What if the author actually wants this provocative, combative tone for engagement metrics?
Interesting angle.
Right, because in the modern media economy, combativeness gets clicks. Using a term like blackists or explicitly calling people uneducated drives outrage. Outrage drives comments, and that triggers the algorithm to push the content wider.
Yeah.
If the author softens the language, do they risk losing the visceral engagement that makes a piece go viral in the first place?
That makes sense. But could the evidence also support a different conclusion? Like the idea that a measured, unbothered tone is far more persuasive for changing minds long term?
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Well, outrage certainly sells in the short term, sure. But look at the author's foundational goal here. They are trying to genuinely debunk a dangerous historical myth that is gaining real traction.
Yeah, they want people to know the truth.
Right, so if you use engagement bait insult, you immediately alienate the exact demographic of listeners who actually need to hear the factual correction.
Oh, that's true.
If someone is on the fence, maybe vaguely believing that podcast clip because they just don't know any better, calling them brainwashed guarantees they will close the tab. You might win a few cheap algorithmic likes from people who already agree with you, but you fundamentally lose the argument.
Yeah, when the facts are this clearly on your side, when you are literally proving that widespread cannibalism was not a systemic industry, you don't need to raise your voice.
You really don't. Let the absurdity of the original claims speak for themselves without needing to insult the intelligence of the people sharing them.
The absolute void of evidence does all the rhetorical work for you. So let's give some concrete examples of how to rewrite these sections.
Okay, instead of labeling the commenters as blackists or attacking their lack of education, just describe them objectively.
Like what?
Like, phrase it as commenters caught up in a cycle of historical embellishment.
Oh, that's much better. It identifies the harmful behavior without attacking the inherent character of the person.
Exactly. It's analytical rather than adversarial. And here is another concrete example regarding the Oppression Olympics terminology.
Right, because that's a pretty loaded phrase.
Very loaded. Instead of using that, frame the mechanism at play. Call it a modern tendency to exaggerate historical suffering for rhetorical points.
That rewrite completely elevates the piece. It transforms the author from like an angry internet critic into a fiercely protective historian.
Softening the language doesn't weaken the argument at all. It actually displays a profound respect for the actual history that occurred.
You establish unshakable composure. But, even with the perfect structure and an authoritative tone, you still have to stick the landing.
Always the hardest part.
Yep. The conclusion introduces entirely new media controversies, which distracts from the core thesis rather than reinforcing the primary argument.
This is so incredibly common in passionate long-form writing.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, the author has built up all this intellectual momentum, and they just want to apply their thesis to everything happening in the culture, right?
So what's the specific weakness here?
In the absolute final moments of the script, the narrative suddenly brings up Netflix's Queen Charlotte and Queen Cleopatra to make a point about blackfacing history.
Which is a massive left turn.
It really is. While it relates tangentially to historical revisionism, introducing Hollywood casting debates in the closing minutes severely dilutes the focus on the specific, visceral claims of the episode, which again were cannibalism and physical torture.
It opens a brand new loop right when the material should be closing the loop on that viral whatever podcast clip.
Exactly. The suggestion is to tie the conclusion directly back to the opening hook and reinforce the central theme of respecting unembellished history.
As I understand it from the notes, the argument here is that the author is deeply passionate about historical accuracy across the board. But what if the Netflix examples are necessary to prove this isn't just an isolated internet rumor, but a mainstream media problem?
It definitely proves a broader trend, yeah.
Right. Like showing that multi-million-dollar productions are doing this too.
Is there a risk that focusing solely on that trend, though, gives the audience an easy off-ramp? I mean, introducing a highly debated topic like casting choices at the very end, it's risky.
Because the human brain does not like cognitive dissonance.
Exactly. If a listener just spent 15 minutes realizing they were completely wrong to believe a rumor about human furniture, they're going to be feeling a little defensive.
Yeah, nobody likes being wrong.
So if you suddenly introduce pop culture topics like casting Zendaya or whatever at the very end, you hand that defensive listener an incredibly easy off-ramp to argue about Netflix instead of reflecting on the danger of the cannibalism misinformation.
Wow, that is a brilliant point. You lose control of the narrative right at the finish line.
They go straight to the comments section to argue about Hollywood executives, completely bypassing the gravity of your actual thesis.
So, concrete examples to fix this.
Cut the references to Netflix's Cleopatra and Queen Charlotte entirely.
Just delete them.
Highlight, delete, and save those really great points for a separate piece. They are strong enough to warrant their own dedicated analysis.
And to replace that gap, conclude by returning directly to the viral clip featuring Brian.
Close the loop.
You open the script by showing how casually he dropped this horrific claim into a microphone. Close the script by reminding the audience of the danger of that exact casualness.
And end on a powerful synthesizing thought already present in the text.
Like what?
Something like, the transatlantic slave trade was horrific enough on its own. We don't need to embellish stories of widespread cannibalism or human leather. History stands on its own, and it demands to be respected accurately.
That is a phenomenal ending. It leaves absolutely no room for debate about pop culture.
It centers the gravity of the actual history.
Okay, to briefly recap the 3 actionable steps to really elevate this material. First, consolidate the historical fact-checking into one solid block of evidence before moving to the cultural critique.
Get the foundation poured.
Exactly. Second, refine the tone by removing pejoratives so your objective authority remains completely unchallenged.
Keep the high ground.
And third, refocus the conclusion on the original viral clip and the core thesis, cutting the distracting Netflix tangent.
The foundational research and the passion are already clearly on the page. It is really just a matter of refining the delivery system.
Absolutely. We want to thank the listener for submitting this deeply interesting and challenging material, and we warmly invite you to apply these structural and tonal edits and submit your work back in again for further feedback.
We'd love to see the next draft.
Because a great case isn't won by shouting the loudest. It's won by presenting a stack of evidence so meticulously organized that the jury has no choice but to agree.